everyone. It's delightful to be with you again here from Paperland and Writers, and I'm with CV Lee. We're going to talk about setting. CV, tell me, you write family saga. What does that genre expect in terms of setting?
So a family saga is a story that follows multiple generations of a family. A lot of times it's centered around the family home. But the other thing that is central to a family saga is something that's happening in the world. Maybe it's political or economic or some kind of social upheaval. So for me,
do you take notes on all those things to help create your setting?
Yes, I do. Because I feel like when you're going through a social upheaval, there's going to be certain ways that people are going to behave, certain types of things that are going to be happening. So just as an example, say if you're looking at a political setting, people are going to behave much differently if you're in a time of peace and prosperity versus if you're in a war and rationing. There's just going to be a very big difference in the way people talk, the way they behave. So I'm looking at a lot of different things as far as setting is concerned.
And can you give us some examples? For example, you talked about politics and rationing, et cetera. What about economic impact of the time period you're writing in, the place you're in?
Well, when I write in the 14th century, they'll have, a change in who's governing. And so maybe the taxes will be increased and people will have less money. So then, of course, there's more social unrest because people have less money. So that's going to be kind of one of the things. So while a lot of people are, and I do too, setting as a time and a place and how people get from one place to another, or what they dress, there's going to be a lot in my type of story on how people are behaving because of what's actually happening around them, things that maybe they don't have any control over.
In your book that you've just finished, for example, what kind of things might impact how someone behaves?
Well, for one thing, you have, in the first part of my book, the French take over the island, and it's very oppressive to the people. So in the first part of my book, it's like if you did not swear loyalty to the person that took over, you lost your house, your estate. So yeah, you're going to be careful about what you say because that's going to affect where you live, what's going to happen with your family. It may take you from being, a person of influence and wealth to poverty.
So you'll have constraints you wouldn't have in a time, as you said, of peace and prosperity. Right?
Correct.
Yeah. How about religious impact? What was going on in the time period and place you're writing about?
Okay, so the only thing that I'm really, as far as religion, bringing up is maybe the indulgences and kind of how they were used then. Just a way for the church to give wealthy people a pass to sin. But in my next book, the Reformation is coming. And of course, things change based on who is king or queen. You have everything changing under Henry VIII. And then Mary comes in, who's his daughter, and she's a strict Catholic. And so you have people being burned at the stake for being the wrong religion. So yes, you're going to be very careful about what you say and what you do, and do you want to be noticed?
And it will, more so than in a contemporary novel where religion doesn't play as big a role, I think it does impact how society expects you to behave, right?
During certain time periods, it's not as, well, it's in the United States, obviously, it's not as important as it once was. Whereas when you go to another part of the world, yeah, it's going to have a big influence on your behavior and what you're expected to do.
What other social mores might come into play in a historical novel setting?
Well, of course, you're going to have, that your nobility, the women are expected to be virgins when they're first married. A man can cheat on, can have affairs where his wife cannot. I mean, that was grounds for divorce.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas the one thing that a woman could do for having divorce is if a man was not capable of giving her children. But her being unfaithful was definitely grounds for divorce where it wasn't the other way around. So obviously she'd have to be very careful or she would lose her position.
Mm-hmm. Did that change over time or over as a character aged? And do you address that in your book? A sense of getting older and anything goes that we might see today as women come into their own, or did that impact life much for women of the time?
Well, once you were widowed, it just had a little bit more flexibility. People didn't think so much if you took a lover or if you married for love.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, I'm talking about the upper class, but lower classes were more likely to. They could marry for love, although you probably just married someone in your village.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, there's a lot to it. I think when we think of setting, as you said earlier, we think of the physical location in the time and place.
Mm-hmm.
And this is more complex than that. So tell me a little bit before we wrap up here about your note taking and the way that you approach this so that you make sure you touch base with all of those elements.
It's just a lot of it is not necessarily taking notes because the time period that I'm writing in has so little actual information.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just getting a feel of what was going on as far as what things were happening. So then I would have to surmise what was going on as far as how people would behave. So like, for example, in my second book that I'm going to be working on, they have a new governor on the island, and he would just like to have someone go out and pick up women for him. And so it just got to the point where a girl could not walk anywhere by herself. So you can start to surmise that obviously there was a lot of fear amongst the women with this person.
And the more you read and the more you're aware, the more you're the expert on the time period and the place, the setting, right?
Yeah, sometimes it's kind of interesting because of where I'm writing about with the Channel Islands, especially Jersey. A lot of the records were destroyed because they thought that the Black Plague was living in the records, so they burned a lot of the records. So everything's pretty minimal. So sometimes when I read through and studying and bringing so many different pieces together, I actually wonder sometimes if we know more than the historians do, because sometimes I'm a little confused about, I don't know why this happened. And I'm like, I think I know why it happened.
It's funny how you connect the dots, isn't it? Sometimes subconsciously until you need it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's different, I think, when you're trying to pull strings together to put a story together than if you're doing a history of each person and not actually like connecting everybody together.
I agree. Well, it sounds like you have fascinating settings for both your current and your upcoming novel. I can't wait to read them both. So thanks so much for sharing what you know about setting.
Thanks, Catherine.
All right. Talk to you soon.
Talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye.